Hello, friends. I'm Reverend Joe Morrow, Associate Pastor here at Fourth Presbyterian Church of Chicago, and welcome to the Salt and Light podcast. I'm so excited to launch this new forum for conversation with our congregation's mission and community partners across the city, the state, the country, and the globe. From the Gospels of the Christian Bible, we hear the call of Jesus to be salt and light for the world. These are two of the most popular descriptions for what we as Christians aspire to be in the world. Light that lifts the shadows and gives warmth and makes the invisible seen, and salt, that ancient spice that preserves all that is good, loving, and just. Those words have particular meaning for our congregation, Fourth Church, because of our longtime motto to be a light in the city. So you're going to get to meet some amazing people, lights in the city and beyond, and amazing organizations, some Christian and some not, but all who reflect these divine qualities and can inspire us to change our world for the better. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you our special guest, our first guest of this new podcast, Mr. Ron Bottrell. Hello, Ron.
Joe, good morning. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for taking some time to talk with us today. I've really been looking forward to this conversation with you. We've known each other in the congregation for a while now, but we're going to talk about a side of your life and ministry that many of us here have not heard about. Your work with Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, otherwise known as PDA, which is a vital arm of our denomination, the Presbyterian Church USA's mission efforts to care for those who live on the front lines of natural, and we're going to talk about this later, human-made disasters. When we think about the immediate impact that communities of faith can make in times of crisis, this is exactly the kind of work that most readily comes to mind. And Ron, you've just celebrated an important milestone. So why don't you tell us about that?
Well, yes, this year marks the 15th year that I served on the national response team of Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, starting in 2010. And the way that I began my tenure with PDA is kind of interesting because,
tell us about that.
Like a lot of Fourth Church members sitting in the pews on Sunday, after a major disaster, we hear someone like an associate pastor like yourself during the offering preparatory say that some of the contributions will be going to Presbyterian Disaster Assistance.
Right.
And for a long time, I didn't know much about PDA, really hadn't investigated it much. I didn't know whether this was someone in our headquarters in Louisville who wrote checks or just what did PDA do. Shortly around the year 2009, Polly and I were in Santa Fe on vacation, and we went to worship service at First Presbyterian in Santa Fe. And just prior to the start of the service, about 50 people walked in, all wearing blue jackets.
Wow.
And it turned out to be the national response team for Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, who was meeting at nearby conference center just outside of Santa Fe. And so they invited us after church to come out and take a look. Well, we felt like stalkers in a way, but we did. And while we didn't crash any of their meetings, we did have a chance to talk to them during breaks. And afterwards, I thought, wow, I had been considering spending some of my retirement years doing Red Cross volunteer work. And I thought, well, why not spend my volunteer time with the disaster response organization of my own denomination? And so I looked into it, applied. Adam Franzak, who was then an associate pastor at Fourth,
yes.
nominated me. And, years later, I ended up going to Adam's church in Cincinnati on a deployment. So that linkage came full circle. But that was the start. And I did join the National Response Team, and that's how it all began.
Wow. And what did you do for your day job while you joined PDA?
So my day job was essentially being a crisis management consultant. The first half of my career, the first 20 years, was with Quaker Oats Company, and I was director of corporate communications. And there were a number of product recalls and accidents, fires, plant accidents that required follow-up communication and training for the Quaker employees in order to be better prepared for those kinds of incidents. Then the last half of my career was strictly on the consulting side with Hill & Knowlton, the public relations firm that I had used as outside consultants when I was at Quaker. And so my focus, not surprisingly, was food industry companies. And so it was everything from product recalls to foodborne illness outbreaks.
All the challenging and difficult, the worst things that could happen.
Exactly. So that was my civil career leading up to retirement and becoming a PDA volunteer.
I have to say I admire that, because so many times in life, those of us who have careers in areas that are intense, challenging, have a lot of crises, and you did crisis management for a living, would want to do something quite the opposite in our free time. For me, I love coffee, and I love coffee in particular because, unlike ministry, which goes on and on and on, and the process of transformation never quite ends, with coffee, I can make a pour over in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and that's it, fait accompli. But for you, you really embraced the challenge of dealing with crises in your free time for people who are in great need. And we want to talk later on about, I think, how your faith has led you to do that and how your faith has been transformed by doing that. But first, tell us, when you're on the National Response Team and you're going out to the site of a natural disaster, what happens? What do you do? What does that process look like?
Well, first of all, in terms of being asked to respond, to deploy to a disaster, all of us on the National Response Team had to keep an availability chart so that the person in charge of the National Response Team knew, depending on where the disaster occurred, who, in that general geographic area might be available in order to be deployed. So it was a combination of proximity, skills that might be required given the type of disaster it was, and also trying to create a response team that, was a kind of a blend of skills and ethnicity,
right,
in order that we could best respond to the individuals that we would be asked to assist.
And then when you're on the ground, so you're invited, team is assembled, what are the kinds of things that they have you doing? I know when the Red Cross comes in, maybe there are medical tents set up. There's when there's flooding that happens, people are carrying sandbags, right, to try to shore up particular places from floodwaters. What do you do as part of that National Response Team when you're, let's say, in a hurricane site?
Well, for the first team to arrive at the disaster site, a lot of it is just assessment. Mm-hmm. It is meeting with the presbytery, meeting with local churches that may have been impacted.
So this is in our Presbyterian system, so the collection of local
That's where it starts. PDA does not just show up. Mm-hmm. We have to be invited in. Some of our colleagues in other faith-based disaster organizations think that's kind of a quaint practice. They just get in their pickup trucks and go. But we have to be invited in by the presbytery, and the individual who coordinates our national response team always reaches out to the presbytery because they keep track of where disasters are occurring. They're watching the weather maps, and they're contacting the presbytery and say, how are you doing? Would you like a team to come in and provide some assessment and guidance?
So they're proactive in that respect.
Yes, and usually the answer is yes. So the team gets there and they assess the situation, and then they counsel the churches on a couple of things. One is to apply for grants in order to become part of what may be a long-term recovery committee or group in that community. We urge the local churches to become part of that process. One of the things that I always tried to do was to identify someone within the church who had the certain skill sets and interest in order to become a part of that community group. Sometimes the disaster took place near where a Fortune 500 company was headquartered. And that's sort of optimum in some ways. There were disasters that I responded to in Michigan and in Central Illinois, where Caterpillar was headquartered, and in Michigan, where Dow Chemical was headquartered. And employees of those companies who were Presbyterians served on their long-term recovery committees locally, but they were able to not just tap into PDA, but to tap into their own employer in terms of getting grant money and resources. And so I always say, it's never great to have a disaster, but if it's near a big corporation headquarters
that has significant resources,
the recovery rate, it accelerates, and the recovery happens much more quickly than it would where there may not be enough resources to apply.
So that's geographic location, but also social location of local Presbyterians, knowing that, hey, I work for a company and can get resources from them or from other organizations that can allow me to accelerate the process of recovery.
Right.
That's excellent. So what are some of the other things that you all might do, and how long do you stay?
Well, the first deployment may be a week, 2 weeks maybe, depending on the size of the disaster, the amount of territory that it covers. But there will be, other teams that may follow up. We submit our reports, indicate, where we see certain needs based on what we've been told and what we've observed. But usually they don't want you out there more than, a couple of weeks at a time.
Okay.
The longest deployment I ever had was 30 days.
Wow. Where was that? Do you know?
That took place in Florida 6 months after the disaster occurred. It was in response to Hurricane Irene, which I think was 2017. Yeah. And PDA was asked by FEMA to provide individual members of the National Response Team to embed in the joint headquarters that FEMA started up at the disaster site near Orlando.
Wow.
And so it was a huge corporate building that was empty at the time, and FEMA just took it over and brought in all of the FEMA employees from the region. And I was one of the very few, volunteers from a faith-based organization. And this was 6 months after the disaster occurred, but a lot of individuals were nearing the end of their FEMA assistance for housing. And so that was a critical time. Some long-term recovery groups had still not been formed in a number of surrounding counties. And so I would go out with FEMA representatives to encourage them to start a long-term recovery group in their county. And at the 6-month mark, as you can imagine, some survivors were unhappy with the amount of remuneration they had received, the speed with which it was provided, and just unhappy about their plight in general.
Oh, sure. The frustration builds.
So I really have a lot of empathy for FEMA employees because they caught the brunt of a lot of that. And I think having somebody from a faith-based disaster organization as part of the team may have softened some of that negativity in terms of their willingness to form long-term recovery groups and do some of the things that we were advising them to do.
Yeah, I have to think that you were able to provide a good deal of empathy and compassion, both for FEMA employees, for local residents going through this, and knowing that you have this faith background likely played into that for many of them.
That's right. Now, one of the things that PDA does is emotional and spiritual care counseling. And this is done oftentimes, after a church or a presbytery has been working on, recovering from a crisis, maybe 4 to 6 months after it occurs. Everyone is just, feeling a little dispirited. Things aren't happening as quickly and as smoothly as they would like. And so they ask PDA to come in and provide some emotional and spiritual care to those individuals who are working actively on disaster response. Some of those emotional and spiritual care sessions are also provided to outside organizations like FEMA recovery employees, the FEMA volunteer organization. Their volunteer activity liaisons is the official title for the FEMA VALs. And PDA has provided some emotional spiritual care workshops for those as well.
Oh, that's fantastic and powerful. I mean, you're alluding to the fact that there's so much, we might call it soul care, that needs to happen, not just for those individuals and families who are going through that disaster, but also those who are responding to it. That as caregivers, they need care themselves.
Yes, and the American Red Cross does a great job at feeding and sheltering people who are displaced from their homes following a natural disaster. What they do not have in sufficient quantity, though, are individuals who can come into the shelters and provide emotional and spiritual care that is much needed by people who feel they've just lost everything. But the Red Cross wants to make sure that the people who do that are trained and are not going to in any way take advantage of the situation that these people find themselves. And so there's a very diligent screening process that takes place and training, Red Cross training, that PDA and other denominations who are involved in this type of of care have to undergo. But it's just one of the aspects of what we do.
That's powerful, very powerful, and good to know that those individuals who are offering that kind of care are trustworthy,
yes,
given how they've been trained and formed to do that work. I want to shift real quick to unnatural disasters, human-made disasters. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? Have you ever been deployed to a site where that's happened?
Yes, and I should give you a little bit of history. And the very first man-made or unnatural disaster that PDA deployed to was the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City.
Very tragic incident.
Very tragic.
Back in the 90s.
And so the churches and community organizations at that time asked for PDA to provide some assistance, and particularly in the areas of emotional and spiritual care, and that was done. Then, following Columbine, which was more than 20 years ago, PDA created a team of people who specialize in responding to these kinds of unnatural disasters. And that has since enlarged to maybe 8 or 10 people who that is their focus. That is what they are good at. And 3 of those individuals who served in that capacity for PDA wrote a book about that experience. Lori Krause, who was a longtime PDA volunteer and
love Lori, yeah.
Yes, and has preached it forth during her tenure as the director of PDA. She and a couple of other people who specialize in that kind of disaster response co-wrote the book, and it's a real resource for pastors, particularly.
Yeah.
Most pastors are not skilled or had really thought through the what ifs. If something like that happened locally or even in their church.
It's not a seminary course, I can tell you that.
It's not.
Basic pastoral care.
But just to be able to have some of the basics, the book provides a lot of information for pastors.
But it does seem as though the work that you're doing in being able to provide that emotional care and being able to think through how to respond to these unnatural disasters provides something very unique that PDA and faith-based communities can really offer. And so I'm deeply appreciative of that.
Following the mass shooting that occurred at a Baptist church in Sutherland, Texas in 2017, I think 26 people were actually killed at that church on a Sunday morning. PDA received requests from a number of pastors saying, what can you give me that would make me better prepared in the unlikely event that something like that might happen at our church. We didn't really have anything specific in the terms of guidance at that point. But I got tasked, maybe because of what I did in my civil career.
Crisis management,
to look into that and to create, first of all, a list of resources, online resources almost entirely, that people could become better informed about that kind of preparedness. And so we created this resource list, and then a number of things happened following 2020. More and more of our churches started getting direct threats. It was largely in response to areas of our social justice ministries.
Yeah.
And certain individuals aligned with hate groups did not approve of our social justice ministries. And so Black Lives Matter signs began being torn down at some of our churches.
Yeah. It's happened in our Presbyterian.
The LGBTQ rainbow memorabilia began being destroyed. Rocks, bricks thrown through some of the stained glass windows. Actual threats being made to pastors.
Wow.
And so, as a result of that, we were asked to actually come up with a training course that we could provide to presbyteries in order to help them be better prepared for that unlikely possibility that their church might be targeted on any given Sunday, or frankly, any given day of the week, given the kinds of activities and ministries that happen at our churches during the week.
Yeah.
So we created a course, and we specifically wanted to make sure that it did not recommend armed security as part of that preparedness. We just did not feel that that was something that the denomination would want. And so we took a training course ourselves, offered by an organization called ALICE, which is an acronym. But it was basically the run, hide, fight philosophy that the Department of Homeland Security preaches in their preparedness courses. And so we have been, for the last 5 years now, been conducting these kinds of disaster preparedness courses for presbyteries. Multiple churches attend these on Saturdays. They're all-day conferences. And that essentially has been where my focus has been for the last 5 years, was leading the team of PDA National Response Team members who provide that training. And so
Wow.
I never thought that would end up being a specialty
Of yours.
but the last 5 years it has been.
Sadly, very necessary.
Yes, and I've witnessed and heard about a number of occasions where our churches have been on the receiving end of threats that, and in a few cases, actually threats that were carried out. We have had one mass shooting at a PCUSA church, and that occurred a couple of years ago in Southern California. And it was a church that was Taiwanese, and kind of reminds me of the World War II era story about Fourth, where the Japanese Americans were worshiping in Stone Chapel.
Yes.
And
Very powerful story.
but the church in Southern California made their church available to the Taiwanese Presbyterians, and so it was a 2-service schedule with the Taiwanese having the second service. And unfortunately, there was someone who came in and with the intent, for political reasons solely related to the Taiwan-China political conflict, that was the motivation. And there was a couple of deaths as a result of that shooting. But
Lord have mercy.
the individuals in that service, mostly seniors, were able to take down the intruder and saved a number of lives in the process of doing that without any training.
Wow. It's quite a heroic effort.
It was a heroic effort, and it's very moving to hear their story. They actually ended up writing a book about it.
Wow. Should find
it's in Taiwanese.
We need to translate it in English.
But
so
it's a beautifully written and illustrated book about their experience and just how grateful they are to God for their being able to survive and to continue.
Wow. What a powerful story. And also, I can see how important this work has been for you. What have you learned from these communities that you've worked with over the years? I think you said earlier, 59 deployments in those 15 years. What have you learned about what it takes to be salt and light, if you will, for people who are going through these kinds of crises, whether they're natural or human-made?
Well, I think a lot of us have motivation to do what we can in order to make things better around us, within our community, within our own church. And, we just need to find some ways to do that. And I think depending on an individual's interests, those opportunities are out there. I feel fortunate that I was able to kind of channel my feelings in this regard through PDA the last 15 years. Now I'm that I've retired from PDA. I'm looking for the next challenge.
If anybody has an idea,
the next opportunity, and so
send it our way, and we'll tell Ron.
But I think that's what we all have to do. We can't just sit back and observe. I think we need to look for ways that we can apply ourselves.
Yeah, and my sense is from your own story and from those that you tell that the people who find those opportunities come in all sorts of shapes, backgrounds. They can be old, young, come from various different cultural communities, have various different language skills, but everybody has that capacity to do some good in the midst of crisis. And it seems that there are a lot of people who are finding that. I'm wondering I'm wondering if there has been maybe a person or a community in particular that stands out to you for their resilience, maybe their strength, their capacity to kind of hold on in the midst of really, really difficult, challenging disasters.
Well, it's not a disaster that I personally was deployed to. But this past year, when the flooding occurred in North Carolina.
Oh, yes.
Terrible flooding, record level flooding. A lot of that occurred up in the hills and mountains, really, of Western North Carolina, near where the Presbyterian Montreat Conference Center takes place, yes, or is located. I've been to Montreat. I've been to Black Mountain, which is adjacent to Montreat. And there are a number of retired Presbyterian pastors who that's where they settle in retirement. There are homes, there are facilities there for pastoral retirees. So when that disaster occurred, communication basically became non-existent. This was one of those situations where Wi-Fi connectivity didn't exist. Cell phone coverage didn't exist because the cell phone towers were all washed away. And there was just a lot of flood damage in and around Montreat and Black Mountain. I later saw videos that people took of what essentially was a town meeting in the kind of like the center of town as people came together to find out what had happened. Maybe somebody came in on a four-wheel vehicle and they were able to bring news from the outside. And so these 200 people would circle around and they would hear, the latest in terms of, what was going to happen and when. And the community that really already existed, but became even more solidified because of the commonly, held disaster that they were living through, was impressive. And I really admired what a lot of our Presbyterian brethren and sisters were able to do in what was probably the most harrowing experience of their lives.
Absolutely. It was very inspiring and interesting, as you put it, to stay with that image of the town gathering together in person. Kind of like this, I'm imagining this open air town hall meeting where neighbors that have perhaps been behind walls and closed doors come out into the open because a disaster forces them to. A disaster can potentially strengthen a community and give them a reason to gather more closely together. When so many of us kind of stay in our own little spaces and in our own private homes.
Well, Black Mountain Presbyterian Church became sort of a food pantry of sorts as people would go there in order to get the necessities, water and whatever food was available. North Carolina is barbecue central, and so those people who had grills and could and a meat source.
We may not have much, but we have good barbecue tonight.
That's right. So there was that, and so that really kind of, I think, lifted people's spirits. Their homes may have some water in it. It may not be as livable as they would like. They didn't have a lot of they didn't have running water or other kinds of resources, but they had themselves as a community, and they were able to, I think, meet the challenge. Because they were able to rally like that.
The community stayed intact.
Yes.
Even when many other things didn't.
That's right.
And that's powerful. Especially when you get to know your neighbors, and sometimes a disaster forces you to get to know your neighbors. And then maybe in the future, it won't take as long to get to know them, to knock on the door, to learn their names and learn their stories as well. Before we go, I know you've often talked about PDA as a second church. And so I want to ask you, how has your faith been strengthened and transformed by this work?
Well, in a couple of ways. First of all, as being one of 90 members on what was the national response team, which is comprised of, it's a blend. It's about 60% laity, 40% clergy. The clergy members, some of them may be retired, but some of them are not. And their time, their volunteer time, is essentially the contribution of their local church as part of its contribution to PDA. So it's a blend of lay and clergy. But it's also a blend of people from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
And you get to know these individuals very well. If you're deployed as a team together, there's a lot of sharing of our personal histories in that process of doing that. Conversations over meals. You get to know people, I would say, better than we normally get to know our fellow congregants.
Yeah, it's not just coffee hour.
No, in our home church. And we stay in touch with emails if there's an illness, if there's a death. There's this kind of sharing of concerns and grief. So the National Response Team really did feel like a second church to me.
Wow.
And I miss, what do I miss? That's maybe one of the things that I miss most is that connectivity.
Yeah, that bond
that I regularly had. Fortunately, I continue to be on the emails for PDA, knowing who is being deployed, what teams are being deployed to a particular disaster. So I can sort of follow some of my friends and colleagues that I worked with during my time on PDA and sort of give them a prayer as they deploy to their next disaster. And so it's kept me better informed about the ongoing activity of PDA than I might have had otherwise, and I'm grateful for that. I really appreciate
that. It's like keeping a vigil with those who you served with, keeping the light on and the prayers going.
That's right.
For those who continue the work that you began as well.
That's right.
That's powerful. Ron, before we go, is there maybe a book, an article, film, music that's inspiring you right now that you may want to recommend to others? I know we've mentioned a couple of books earlier, and I'll make sure that those get shared with others. But perhaps there might be others that you would want to share as well.
Well, about a year ago, there was a movie that came out called Leave the World Behind. And it starred Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke. And it's about a family that rents a house on Long Island. They live in New York. And in the course of going on this weekend outing, all kinds of chaotic events occur. Basically, starting with a cyber security incident that knocked out all Wi-Fi connectivity, all cell phone activity. And so it becomes a survival movie in that sense, and how they relate to people in the neighborhood where they've rented this house. I think preparedness is very important. It's one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on now. I think that I have more time to do so. But I think it's important for all of us to think about some of the what ifs and how we might be able to survive and
as difficult as that might be,
get through some of the hardships in the event that we experience those ourselves.
It sounds like a great parable for how would I react? How would my life differ if I were in this situation, and how might it impact my faith and my relationship with others, and know my neighbors better as well.
Exactly.
Thank you for that, Ron. All right, friends. Well, I hope you were inspired by today's conversation with Ron Bottrell. Maybe you will look for ways to volunteer or be better prepared to support those in your community or circles whenever the unexpected strikes. If there's something in particular that inspired you today or something you'd like us to pursue for further podcasts, please reach out to me and I'll put our contact information and make it available for you as well. Thank you, Ron. Thank you for your 15 years, your 59 deployments, and the ongoing work of PDA.
Thank you, Joe. My pleasure in being here.
Blessings, everybody. Till next time, be salt and light.